Hey everyone! This is a quick reminder to subscribe and hit that like button. It lets me know that you are enjoying my content. Also, feel free to drop your suggestions for future stories in the comments below. Thank you for listening, and let's dive right in. Minute 1. My phone vibrated in my lab coat pocket. I pulled it out, expecting an email, a Slack notification, something mundane. Instead, a bright red banner filled the screen, stark and demanding. Emergency alert. You have 1 hour. I frowned. 1 hour for what? My first thought was a drill, maybe some kind of evacuation notice. But my heart quickened when I glanced around the lab and saw the exact same alert glowing on every single screen. Every phone, every monitor. I looked up at Madeleine, my research partner. She'd just taken her phone off its charging dock, and her hands were shaking. Then, my phone buzzed again. The text was gone. In its place was a countdown. Minute 2. A blood-curdling scream shattered the stunned silence. It came from the hallway, long, drawn out, and full of raw, animalistic terror. Then another. A crashing sound, metal against tile. I stood up so fast my chair scraped violently against the floor. I wasn't the only one. Every scientist in the lab, maybe 20 of us, had gone rigid, all staring at the countdown ticking mercilessly towards something unknown. Someone bolted for the door. I grabbed Madeleine's wrist. "Stay here," I whispered. She didn't answer. Minute 3. She was crying. Tears streamed down her face in silent, unrelenting horror. I'd never seen her like this before. Madeleine, the calmest person in the department, crumbling right in front of me. All around the lab, I heard the same frantic whispers. Heavy breathing, muted sobs. Some people still hadn't moved. Others were frantically refreshing their phones, as if this were just some horrible mistake that could be undone by sheer will. Then came another noise. A thud outside. Someone had collapsed. I turned toward the door, my pulse hammering in my ears. Minute 4. Then the sirens began. It was so loud, my teeth buzzed from the vibration. The kind of alarm you'd expect for a nuclear threat, a direct missile strike. Not a drill, not a test. The emergency lights flickered to life, painting everything in a sterile, white glow. The automated campus alert system had been activated. Attention, attention, please seek immediate shelter. Await further instructions. Madeleine flinched beside me. The others broke. Minute 5, people ran, not just inside the lab, outside too. I could see them through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Students sprinting in every direction, bumping into each other, dropping their bags, abandoning their bikes. Some just stood there, frozen, clutching their phones, waiting for an explanation that wasn't coming. I heard a crash to my left. A chair hit the floor. The door banged open as someone shoved past a coworker and disappeared down the hallway. Someone else screamed. Madeleine gripped my sleeve. "Martha, what the hell is happening?" I didn't have an answer. Minute 6, Professor Huang slammed his hand down on a desk. "Everyone, please, calm down." His voice, normally a deep measured baritone, cracked with strain. It didn't matter. No one was listening. The air reeked of sweat and fear. Someone threw up in a trash can. The sirens still wailed outside. I glanced back at my monitor. 5 minutes gone. 5 minutes ripped away by chaos, and I was no closer to understanding what the hell was happening. Minute 7. All at once, the news channels cut out. Every single screen in the lab flickered. The live broadcast of a weather report, the YouTube playlist someone had been using for white noise, all replaced with the same black screen. Then, white text. Emergency broadcast in progress. A still silence spread through the lab. Even the screams outside grew distant, as if people had paused to watch their own impending doom unfold. Minute 8. Then the president came on screen. I recognized the Oval Office backdrop, but something was wrong. He wasn't wearing a suit. Just a wrinkled shirt, the tie loosened and crooked. Sweat beaded along his hairline. When he spoke, his voice was thin and strained. "Please, stay calm." That was all he said at first. He took a long, ragged breath, as if he was struggling to convince himself of his own words. Then, finally, "We are still gathering information on the nature of this threat. Please shelter in place. Do not attempt to leave the cities." I stared at the screen, my own breath uneven. A threat. Minute 9, I don't remember making the decision. My body moved on instinct. I grabbed my bag, my keys, my coat. Blue. I need to get to Blue. The thought of my dog alone in the condo while the world descended into hysteria made my stomach twist. I fumbled for my phone and called my neighbor. Straight to voicemail. I shoved my bag over my shoulder, heart hammering against my ribs. Minute 10. Then, the dam broke. Someone in the hallway screamed again, but this time it was different. It wasn't terror, it was desperation. Footsteps thundered outside the lab. People were running. It took 2 seconds for the fear to become a stampede. Bodies collided. People shoved past one another, knocking over chairs, knocking over people. Someone hit the floor with a sickening crunch. I threw my coat over my bag strap and moved toward the exit. Outside, the building was collapsing into full panic. I pushed through the doorway, into the storm, and the countdown continued. Minute 11, I ran. The hallways were chaos, shouting, crying, bodies colliding in blind panic. Someone knocked over a metal cart, sending glass beakers shattering across the tile. My feet barely touched the ground as I pushed toward the nearest exit. Outside, the sky was too bright, too blue, too normal. But then my phone buzzed with a notification. A new emergency broadcast. I didn't slow down as I unlocked my screen. NASA urgent update. Object detected. Classified as unknown entity. I almost tripped over my own feet. An object. I didn't have time to process it. I needed to get home. Minute 12, another alert. NASA object located behind the sun. Projected to emerge in 8 minutes. My stomach clenched. It was coming. I sprinted across the parking lot, dodging frantic researchers fumbling with their keys. People were screaming into their phones, some just standing frozen like deer in headlights. A man slammed his car door and sped off so fast his tires shrieked. Someone else crashed into the side of his bumper, trying to do the same. I stumbled toward my car, shoving my keys into the ignition. My hands were shaking too hard to get it in on the first try. Minute 13. As soon as I turned onto the main road, I saw it. Looting. The gas station on the corner had glass doors smashed in, people running out with armfuls of whatever they could grab. Some stuffed their trunks with bottled water, others just grabbed liquor. The pharmacy wasn't any better. Someone had driven a truck straight through the front window, and a crowd swarmed inside. I gritted my teeth and pressed harder on the gas. The police weren't coming. The streets were already drowning in people, and there were too many of them. Minute 14. I hit the call button on my steering wheel. Caleb. The phone rang twice before a harsh inhale came through the speaker. Martha. He was breathing too fast, not just out of breath, panicked. I don't have much time, he rasped. I'm in the bunker, but Jesus, it's bad. What the hell is happening? I demanded. What did NASA find? There was a long pause. I could hear his pulse pounding through the line. Minute 15. He exhaled sharply. Martha, it's not just a black hole. I gripped the wheel. It's controlled. I swerved too hard into a turn and almost clipped a mailbox. What the fuck do you mean it's controlled? I said. How does a black hole get controlled? We don't know, he said quickly, but it's moving too precisely. A natural black hole wouldn't just appear, and it sure as hell wouldn't be swallowing planets in a direct line. I nearly slammed the brakes. Planets. Caleb, I whispered. Are you telling me this thing already destroyed? A noise came through the speaker. A low, shuddering breath. Yes. Minute 16. My radio flickered. I jumped, my heart hammering. The local news station had just switched back on, cutting through the eerie static. The anchors were there, but they looked wrong. The man on the left, normally put together, polished, was ghostly pale, gripping the desk. The woman beside him had red, swollen eyes, her makeup smudged. Neither looked at the camera. They were reading something. Something scripted. The man licked his lips. His voice was unsteady. If you are receiving this message, we urge you to remain in your homes. The situation is developing. A pause. Then he exhaled and added, God help us. Minute 17, a new voice cut through the radio. The military. By executive order, a state of emergency has been declared. Martial law is now in effect. Martial law? That had only happened once in my lifetime, and it had never felt like this. As I turned onto the highway, I saw them. Tanks. Armed soldiers. A convoy of Humvees barreled down the opposite lane, heading toward the city. The government wasn't just trying to contain the panic, they were preparing for something bigger. Minute 18. I caught a glimpse of the city skyline. There was smoke. I didn't know when it had started, but it was rising fast, thick black clouds curling above the buildings. Another explosion rocked the air. I saw people sprinting down the sidewalks, dragging suitcases, children, whatever they could carry. Looting had turned into full-blown riots. The world wasn't waiting to find out what was coming. It was already tearing itself apart. Minute 19, I swerved onto my street and slammed on the brakes. My apartment complex looked untouched. The parking lot was full, probably because no one knew where to go. Some people were standing outside their doors, staring at their phones, pale and motionless. I practically fell out of the car and ran up the steps. Minute 20, I unlocked the door and Blue launched himself at me, dropping my bag and pulling him into my arms. His tail wagged furiously, but his body was rigid, tense. He knew something was wrong. I let out a shuddering breath, pressing my face into his fur. Then I grabbed the remote and turned on the TV. The first thing I saw was the countdown. The second thing I saw was the sun. But for the first time in my life, I felt afraid to look at it. Because somewhere behind it, something was waiting. And in 8 minutes, we would finally see it. Minute 21. The news anchor's voice was trembling. NASA has released a simulation of the object. The screen cut to a black void, spinning in slow motion. At first, it looked like a simple sphere, a perfect, empty abyss floating in the dark. But then the camera zoomed in and my stomach lurched. It wasn't just black, it shifted, its edges curling inward, like it was breathing. Like it was alive. A heavy silence hung in the air before the simulation continued, showing a planetary system eerily similar to ours. Then one by one the planets blinked out. No explosion, no debris, just gone. A dry, metallic taste filled my mouth. I hadn't even realized I was gripping Blue's collar until he let out a soft whimper. Minute 22. My phone rang. I scrambled for it, almost dropping it in my haste. Caleb. Caleb? I answered breathlessly. A harsh inhale, a few ragged coughs. He was alive, but his breathing sounded worse than before, like he'd been running. I'm in the bunker, he said quickly. At least for now. Martha, listen to me. I don't know how much time we have to talk. I swallowed, gripping the phone. You saw the simulation. A beat of silence. I saw more than that. Minute 23. It already took 3 planets, Martha. I stiffened. Caleb's voice was low, shaking slightly. We just didn't see them yet. I felt like I was sinking. What are you saying? There were 3 planets in its direct path before us. Our telescopes caught glimpses of them weeks ago. And now, there's nothing left. Not even debris. It didn't just consume them, it erased them. I clutched my chest, forcing air into my lungs. The light from those planets hadn't reached us yet, Caleb continued. By the time we knew, they were already gone. Minute 24. The TV cut to live aerial footage. Air Force bases across the country were being swarmed by civilians, thousands of them. Some were waving handwritten signs that just said, please. Others were trying to force their way in. Gunshots rang out. Not warning shots. My vision blurred. The military was shooting at civilians. I turned away from the screen, bile rising in my throat. Blue whined, pressing against my legs. Minute 25, I moved on autopilot. I grabbed Blue's food bag, poured out a bowl, and watched him eat. I wanted to believe this mattered, that keeping some kind of normalcy would help. But the truth was, none of this mattered. I scratched behind Blue's ears as he chewed. Good boy, just eat, baby, please. Minute 26. The channel switched. A cathedral. A single man in white stood before thousands of people packed into Vatican Square. It took me a second to realize who it was. The Pope. He raised his hands to quiet the crowd, and when he spoke, his voice carried through the speakers, even through the static. My children, I ask you now in our final moments to pray. A sob cracked through his voice. He looked down, whispering something in Latin. Then slowly he lifted his face to the sky and began to weep. Minute 27. A new voice cut through the broadcast. The sun will vanish in exactly 8 minutes. I stared at the TV, unable to blink. The scientist speaking looked defeated, shoulders hunched, tie loosened, staring into the camera like a man on death row. The object is now aligned with our solar plane, he continued, voice hollow. Once the sun disappears, Earth will follow. I sat down. My legs felt too weak to hold me. Minute 28. The phone crackled. Caleb's breathing was shallow, strained. Martha. His voice was barely above a whisper. I swallowed hard. I'm here. A pause. Then, more static. He exhaled shakily. I don't think there's anything left to do, he admitted. I pressed my fingers to my temples, squeezing my eyes shut. He was right. No escape, no solution, no last-minute salvation, just time running out. Minute 29, I wiped my face with the back of my hand, surprised to find it wet. Tears. I hadn't even realized I was crying. Caleb sighed through the receiver, a soft, tired sound. "It's strange," he said, "knowing exactly when it ends." I stared at the countdown on the screen. 31 minutes. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Yeah," I whispered, and neither of us said anything else. Minute 30. Then, the emergency alert blared back onto the screen. Red text. A live feed from an Air Force base. I turned to look. The nuclear missiles were launching. One after another, the warheads blasted into the sky, leaving fiery trails in their wake. They were aiming at the darkness, at the thing behind the sun. I held my breath. I knew it wouldn't work. But I still watched. Because what else was there to do? Minute 31. I stood at the window, Blue pressed against my leg, both of us watching as the city tore itself apart. Fires burned in the distance, apartment complexes, gas stations, the skyline smudged with black smoke. The main road below was clogged with abandoned cars, horns blaring endlessly where people had simply left them and ran. Figures darted between buildings, breaking into storefronts, grabbing whatever they could. It didn't matter anymore. Money, supplies, vengeance. Chaos reigned, and I could only stand here and watch. Minute 32. Then, the sky ignited. I flinched as the first mushroom cloud bloomed on the horizon. A deep, crimson fireball rose like a second sun, its explosion rippling outward in a towering inferno. More followed. The missiles had reached their targets. I gripped the windowsill as the shockwave trembled through the glass, shaking the entire building. Blue whimpered, his ears flattened against his skull. "They're still trying," I whispered, "even now." The government's final act wasn't to protect us, it was to fight the inevitable. Minute 33, my phone vibrated. Then again, and again. New messages, missed calls, voicemails stacking. I hesitated before answering. The first was my mother. Her voice was strangled with tears. "Martha, please, if you can hear this, please call me back." The second was a friend I hadn't spoken to in years. "I don't know why I'm calling you. I didn't want to be alone." The third was a number I didn't recognize, a child's voice, small and broken. "Is my mom there? I don't know where she is. Please, someone." I dropped the phone. Minute 34. The emergency broadcast interrupted everything. A scientist from NASA stood behind a podium, his face blank with exhaustion. He looked straight into the camera, defeated. "At exactly 40 minutes, 12 seconds remaining," he said slowly, "the sun will vanish." The words felt detached, unreal. Like he was reciting a script, like this wasn't even his own voice anymore. "There will be no explosion, no warning, no sound. It will simply be gone." I tightened my grip on Blue's fur. Minute 35. My phone rang again. I picked it up with shaking hands. "Caleb?" He let out a slow, shaky breath. "Martha," he murmured, "I don't want to die without telling you something." I turned from the window, blinking back tears that were already slipping free. "I know," I whispered, but he needed to say it. Minute 36, I closed my eyes. I already knew what he was going to say. I had always known, but there was nothing left to wait for now. Minute 37. "I've always loved you," Caleb whispered. His voice was so soft, so raw. I almost couldn't bear it. My chest ached, my vision blurred. I gripped the phone tighter. Minute 38, I let out a slow, shuddering breath. Then I whispered back, "I know." And for the first time since this started, I heard him laugh. A quiet, breathless, broken thing. Minute 39. The countdown reached 40:12. I looked up at the sky one last time. Minute 40. The sun disappeared. The world plunged into darkness. Minute 41. The world screamed. Not just my city, not just my street, everywhere. The second the sun vanished, terror erupted like wildfire. Windows shattered from the sheer force of people clawing to get out or in. Gunshots cracked through the night, and the worst part, I couldn't see anything. The sky, the streets, the buildings, everything was swallowed in darkness. The kind you felt more than saw, like a weight pressing on your lungs. Blue whined, pacing in frantic circles. I turned on the flashlight of my phone, but it felt pathetic, a feeble glow against an all-consuming abyss. Minute 42. Then the cold hit. It was instant, like the warmth had been ripped from the air. My breath came out in a thin, ghostly cloud. Blue shivered against my legs. The heat had been nothing but a memory. Without the sun, the planet was already dying. Frost spread over my windows, an unnatural rime forming on the inside of the glass. The streets below were frozen mid-motion, cars stalled, doors left wide open, their drivers gone. The city once burning was now silent under the weight of ice. Minute 43, Caleb's voice crackled through the phone. "It's coming into view now." I shuddered, curling into myself. "What is?" A deep inhale, a pause, the orb. I didn't ask how he could see it. I didn't want to know. Minute 44, a shadow moved across the sky. Even through the pitch-black air, I saw it, a shape darker than the darkness itself, swallowing everything as it passed. The stars? Gone. The distant city lights? Gone. The sky itself warped and twisted, bending inward as something impossibly massive consumed the horizon, a gaping, roving void. A hole where existence itself was being erased. My knees buckled. I didn't want to see it anymore. Minute 45. Then the skies fell. A deep, thunderous roar shook the heavens as planes dropped like stones, it spiraling out of control. I heard one before I saw it. A distant, growing whine that turned into a scream. A jetliner plunging straight down. I turned away before it hit, before the explosion bloomed in the far distance. They never had a chance. Nothing did. Minute 46, Blue pressed against me, shaking. His ears were flat against his head, his tail curled under. He knew. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't just taking light. It was taking something deeper. Something we weren't meant to understand. Minute 47, Caleb's voice wavered in my ear. "We lost contact with the other bunkers." I clutched my phone tighter. "What? They were there a minute ago, and now?" He let out a shaky breath. "Martha, it's like they were never there." A pause. Then in a voice barely above a whisper, "I think it's eating time itself." Minute 48, static. Then, "Martha, my breath caught." He never finished. Minute 49, the line went dead. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. I hit redial. Nothing. No dial tone. No error message. Just silence. I sucked in a breath. Caleb was gone. Minute 50. Then, the earth trembled. Not a normal quake. Not even an aftershock. Reality itself twisted. The walls stretched, the floor buckled beneath my feet, my furniture blurred like time was trying to unravel around me. The sky above, it wasn't just black anymore, it was collapsing, like a curtain being drawn over the world. And I knew we had minutes left. Minute 51, I held Blue close. His small body trembled violently against me, his breath coming in short, panicked bursts. I ran my fingers through his fur, murmuring softly, trying to soothe him, but I wasn't sure if I was comforting him or myself. The world outside was unrecognizable. The sky was no longer just dark, it was a churning abyss, folding in on itself. And still, the countdown ticked on. Minute 52, the buildings began to stretch. At first, I thought it was my vision failing. But no, the walls lengthened, warped as if space itself was being pulled like taffy. Streetlights bent, roads curled upward into the sky like ribbons unraveling. It was happening. The world was coming apart. Minute 53, I looked up, and there it was, the orb. It wasn't above us, it wasn't below, it was everywhere. A vast, impossible sphere of nothingness, blacker than any night, a cosmic wound devouring everything in its path. It wasn't just destroying the world, it was erasing it. Minute 54, my phone vibrated one last time. The screen glowed through the darkness. Left, I let out a soft, shaking breath. 6 minutes. Minute 55, I stared at the phone, my thumb hovering over Caleb's contact, a meaningless act, but I didn't need him to answer. I closed my eyes and whispered, "I love you, Caleb." The words hung in the air, fragile, lost in the nothing. Minute 56, then, I heard something. A deep, resonating groan from the ocean itself. The tide didn't rise, it lifted. Great walls of water curled into the air, defying gravity. The ocean was peeling away from the earth, lifting upward like an offering. It wasn't just the ocean, everything was floating. Minute 57, I squeezed Blue's trembling body, pressing my forehead to his. His heartbeat was rapid, frantic, alive. And then, slowly, he licked my hand. A small, simple thing, a final comfort. Tears burned my eyes. I closed them. Minute 58, the sound disappeared. Not like a muted noise, not like fading echoes, a full, complete absence of everything, like sound had never existed at all. Minute 59, I felt it before I saw it. The pull. The world drew toward the void, bending toward the center, collapsing inward. Light stretched, objects unraveled, the last remnants of reality spiraling into the abyss. Minute 60, and then the clock struck 0. And there was nothing left at all.